I'm Chris Farrell, and this is On Watch. Thanks for joining us today. Three important points for you. Number one, the impeachment charade is ongoing, as you well know. It's really a political coup aimed against the president, where they're using the process of Congress to overthrow the Trump presidency. It's a long story. You're well familiar with it. It started back even before President Trump took office as a candidate. And now we see Adam Schiff and now Jerry Nadler going through their shenanigans. Something to keep in mind with respect to the impeachment. It's political theater. It's not real. There's a lot of smearing going on. It's an abusive process. We'll see how it all plays out. I'm not even convinced it's actually even going to get to the Senate. I think what they may end up doing is punting and ending up with a censure of the president, which allows them to sort of save face and not be embarrassed. Because if they really go down the path of impeachment and have a trial in the Senate, there's going to be an awful lot of details exposed that the president's opponents are not terribly interested in. Second point, you know that the Inspector General's report is scheduled to come out on Monday, December 9th. I'm looking forward to that very much. A few words of caution. For months, I've been telling folks, while I'm encouraged by the Inspector General's report, and I think that there'll be interesting, good information with respect to all the corruption that was involved at the FBI and Department of Justice against the president, I also offer a cautionary bit of advice, because in my substantial experience in dealing with inspectors general, in fact, the Department of Justice Inspector General and Attorney General, the IG Horowitz, and other departments, to include the State Department, for example, inspectors general are really the Department of cover-ups. I usually say that's where the truth goes to die. There's some very inconvenient facts that are presented to inspectors general that they scrupulously ignore or run away from. Or they use passive voice language in their report, where they'll say something like, well, mistakes were made, without actually assigning specific conduct to persons. I say that with respect to the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, because unlike about 90% of the people that you see on television, I have direct, firsthand personal knowledge of dealing with inspectors general. So I'm not commenting on sort of the political or legal scene. I have dealt with Inspector General at the Department of Justice, State Department, and other departments as well. I know how they operate. I know the sorts of things they look at and they don't look at. For years now, we've been exposing an incredible amount of corruption, law enforcement corruption, in El Paso, Texas. And I can tell you that in one particular instance, one portion of that case, I had to literally bring a witness to Washington, D.C. and offer him up to the Department of Justice. This is a sworn law enforcement officer, and essentially present him volunteering to make a sworn statement, a recorded sworn statement about outrageous law enforcement corruption in El Paso. And the Inspector General at the Justice Department accepted that information begrudgingly. They weren't really interested in it. Well, we've kind of forced them to pay attention to it. And there was a good outcome in the end. I'm not privileged to be able to give you the details of that because of the nature of the case. But I can tell you that Inspectors General, they have their purpose and they serve their particular function, but they're not a prosecutor, right? They're not Mr. Durham. The burden with respect to uncovering misconduct, criminality, corruption of the Department of Justice and the FBI falls upon the shoulders of Attorney General Barr and Mr. Durham. And that's where you can really expect to see some sort of movement or results. Mr. Durham, in my opinion, needs to bring indictments. That's the only thing that will really cause any sort of sense of confidence in the American public in their justice system. And so the IG report will come out. It's going to say what it's going to say. There's lots of speculation. There's efforts in the press by some persons to sort of inoculate themselves. They want to get out in front of the story and make various claims or try to frame the story up a certain way in order to minimize damage to them. I'm thinking of Lisa Page most recently, who came out with an article. It was a puff piece saying, I did nothing wrong, I'm innocent, I'm a victim. There'll be other people like that. The New York Times and Washington Post have been furiously trying to spin a tale saying, oh, it's really no big deal and there's no finding of any wrongdoing. I don't necessarily believe that, but I also don't necessarily believe what some people have said, whether it's on television or in print, saying, oh, this is going to be the bombshell that blows everything open. I'm agnostic, all right? The report's going to say what it's going to say. It'll probably have some good information in there that will reveal or expose the corruption that we've been going after through our own efforts. But it just needs to be sort of judiciously considered. It's neither the bombshell that some people are saying, nor is it some sort of exoneration of gross misconduct and corruption at the Department of Justice. So we got to wait a few days. The report will speak for itself. Senator Graham's going to have IG Horowitz up to testify about it. So let's just take it in stride and know that we have Attorney General Barr and Mr. Durham conducting their own investigation, which in some places intersects, in some places it runs parallel. But this is just sort of another incremental step in getting to the bottom of what was really a legal coup against the president going back now more than 3 years. Okay, third point, I have some exciting news for you. Judicial Watch has 2 new reports that are just about to be released. I have them here. They're still in draft form, so they're not really quite done yet. We have a couple of finishing touches to put on it. They're fascinating reports, if I don't say so myself. A little self-promotion. The first topic I want to discuss with you is that the first report has to do with Soros and the Open Society Foundations. And the title of it is Open Society Foundation Ties to the Russian Collusion Investigation, Ukraine, and the whistleblower. Whistleblowers in quotes, because we all know that whistleblower is not a whistleblower by any legitimate definition. This is a leaker. It's a paid political operative who's attempting to be the ignition point for yet another coup attempt against the president. So there's some very interesting intersections of people, organizations, and money. And it's the Soros' Open Society Foundation, and we walk you through the whole Russia hoax, this latest hysteria over Ukraine, and the relationship of the person who is the purported whistleblower to all of that. So I look forward to that report. I think you'll find that very interesting. The second report we have coming out is the Open Society Foundation's immigration advocacy and funding in the United States. So about a year ago, we had a couple of reports. One had to do with involvement in the so-called migrant caravans coming north. You may recall that. We also issued a report on the 30th of November last year that talked about the staffing and financial nexus between Open Society Foundation and U.S. government. So we listed hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars that Open Society Foundation, its affiliates, its associates, its sort of fellow travelers, hundreds of millions of dollars that they receive in taxpayer money. And then we go through and identify, I think it's 28 people, it's 20 some odd people, that are basically looped up in a revolving door scenario where they work at a particular government agency, then they go out to Open Society Foundation or one of its affiliates, they serve some leadership role there, and then surprise, surprise, they loop themselves back into government. And so that report we put out about a year ago, we're updating that with this discussion of immigration advocacy and financing. And then the first report, of course, I mentioned, which I think will really be very interesting, is the whole Russia hoax. Now we have a Ukraine hoax and ties in the White House. You'll find it very interesting reading, and hopefully we'll get this out to you in very short order. So to recap, the impeachment process drags on. I think the American public sees through it. It's an embarrassment. The IG report's coming out. Keep your powder dry. Let's see what it says. Don't go jumping off the cliff either way, thinking that it's going to be the end of the world bombshell tell-all. I don't believe it will be. But I also don't believe the New York Times and the Washington Post who say, oh, it's no big deal, everyone's forgiven, go home. This is probably somewhere in the middle there. And it'll be important to read the report very carefully because of the way that IGs use language to explain things. And also listen to what Senator Graham's hearing with Mr. Horowitz. And then a couple of more exciting Judicial Watch reports coming out shortly. We're working on a third one that has to do with Open Society Foundation involvement in municipal, state, and local elections. There's a lot of money being thrown around for district attorney races around the country. And sure enough, Open Society Foundation is involving themselves at that level too. A lot of people don't know that. So, great to be with you again. Great to have another episode of On Watch in the books. Thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Farrell, On Watch.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.